I just said like language is one of the issues. What's actually interesting is that I do speak Japanese, but very often I don't understand the hidden meaning. So I've had the meetings with Japanese counterparts where I understand every word, and I reply them, and my colleague is like, "Hey, they didn't ask for that," and like she actually already told us. So like, okay, like you have to actually tell me for me to understand. But in Japan, very often they imply things, and I'm actually not very good at that. So it's always if you do business in Japan, it's actually you do need to have a Japanese person with you, or like as a co-founder, but also as a co-worker, because they understand the hidden meanings and something which might not be understandable for foreigners. And of course, one of the things, what in Japan, if you go to Japan as a foreign startup, there's a lot of large companies in Japan who want to collaborate with startups. So they talk about proof of concept project, but in my experience, not very often those projects have led anything substantial. So, like large companies in Japan, they know that they have to improve, they have to become more innovative, and they know that they don't actually have in-house capabilities to do that. And it's very trendy nowadays that, okay, let's do projects together with startups. But my experience, actually not one, but with several different companies, has been that very often they actually don't understand startups. They don't know how to work with.
So, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to see you.
You have an interesting background working in both government and startups. What motivated you to make a switch from public to be an entrepreneur?
Actually, I think in my case, being a public servant was a more unusual moment because, before and after, I never actually had a fixed monthly salary, for example. But yeah, so why did I actually leave my public servant's position was that I always thought that Estonia as a country should be more engaged with Asia because, I mean, Asia is basically the economic focal point in 21st century. That's what I've always believed. And I thought that Estonian companies and Estonia in general would have actually a lot to win with having more cooperation with countries in Asia. And while I worked in Estonian Ministry of Economy and Communications, one of my projects was that I actually wrote a strategy for Estonia as a country, Asia program, how Estonia should actually support entrepreneurs to create more connections with Asia. And while doing that, I realized that actually Estonian companies are not looking towards Asia at all. They're looking towards Europe. At least that was that time, like 10, 12 years ago. The resolution for myself was quite clear. Okay, I have to do it by myself. So what happened was that I quit my government job. I created a company in Estonia on the same day, and I moved to Japan just as an entrepreneur. And that was 12 years ago. And I never really worked for somebody else's company after that.
Tell me more about the strategy.
We focused actually on three main areas. So how to actually help Estonian companies to go to Asian market. Also how to get more Asian, foreign direct investment from Asian countries. And also about tourism. And funnily enough, like for example, one of the measures or kind of actions was that I proposed that the Estonian government should organize contact trips. So Estonian companies should be sent to Asian countries and be matched with local companies to see if the market if they are ready for the market. And in reality, I ended up doing support for the same trips in Japan some years later. That was one of the most challenging projects that I ever did, but also most rewarding because in some cases that actually led to real sales and Estonian companies actually creating connection.
Why did you start up a startup in Japan? Because
it wasn't the first thing I did. At first, my idea was that I should be kind of consultant, helping Estonian companies with market entry. And I did that for a while. Then I understood that, okay, actually there is quite a lot that we can also teach from Estonian experience to large Japanese corporations. So I ended up bringing Japanese delegations to Estonia, telling them about Estonian e-government and experience with digitalization. And I also tested out Estonia as a gateway to European market by starting up craft beer import company. So I was selling Japanese craft beer in Europe. And then I was part of one of the teams in Japan where we actually set up cybersecurity. And the technology that we were actually trying to introduce in Japan was Estonian X-ray. And that company had, it was American mountains as always, but we did actually have some success and implemented that X-ray in Japan. Did sell the solution to some Japanese large corporations. But then COVID came, and I really started thinking that there are some things that, I wanted to be in charge of my own startup. And there were many things that I have been always not happy in Japan. And one of them is that banking in Japan for foreigners is especially bad. It's not great for Japanese either, but for foreigners, it's, so if you, in your own country, you might be banked. Then if you move to Japan, you become underbanked. And most of the banking is available only in Japanese. Solutions are mostly paper-based. They still use paper bank book, which is a little bit crazy, but true. I knew that basically in Estonia, we have the necessary skills how to make this happen because there are similar companies founded by Estonians in other countries. Also, so I just basically needed to find the competence in Estonia and also understanding about Japanese banking market and put it together. And that's what I did. So right now, I've been working with Giga last 3 years.
Tell me about the Giga and what is the business model over there and what problem are you going to solve?
So in simple words, we are basically helping foreigners to do daily banking in Japan in a multilingual way, easily from their mobile phone. But maybe I explain how it normally would look like otherwise. Today, when I'm actually as a foreigner, I go to Japan and I go to one of the large bank offices. What will happen is that they will, if I don't speak Japanese, they will tell, actually they have a kind of a poster and they will show it to me saying that, sorry, if you don't speak Japanese, we cannot help you. And then if I have my employer, they might help me actually send some staff with me to actually open a bank account. And the most people end up opening bank accounts in Japan Post Bank. It's not because Japan Post Bank wants to have foreigners, but basically they are welcoming everyone. And their service, it's while function. It's still, you have paper-based bank book, you get the cash card, which you cannot use for payment. They do have online banking, but you have to fulfill application form in Japanese and send it on paper and wait for a month before you can actually do that. So there are many complications, but most foreigners actually end up using Japan Post Bank. Japanese people usually they have their first account as kids also with Japan Post Bank, but as adults, nobody's using it because it's maybe not so competitive. But and then if I want to get the credit card, it's very difficult to get it in Japan because for Japanese banks, foreigners are just not trustworthy enough. Basically right now we have started with making account opening easy, making domestic transfers easy. We also need to introduce payment cards and the foreign remittance into the same application. And then we believe that basically we would be the one-stop for foreigners living in Japan for all of their financial needs. And hopefully in the future, local people will find us also more convenient than other banks in Japan. Also, companies called Giga. In Japan, funnily, they call large banks mega bank, but there's no Giga bank.
Do you think that is there a market, especially for the immigrants in Japan, or most of probably their customers are speaking Japan and they don't need to look for the niche market? What is the reason, and is there a trend or a market opportunity upcoming years?
In Japan nowadays, basically, population is shrinking. There are just two growth markets. One is elderly people because of aging society. And second one is actually foreign. Demographic trends just determine that Japan needs to have more foreign labor coming to the market. And the Japanese government knows that. So it has made it regulation easier to come to Japan for work. And for us, I'm actually seeing foreigners market as serving people who have the highest pay in Japan. Of course, it's also a good entry point because it's a growth market. It's a growing. Today, it's still a niche. So it's maybe barriers are not so big and the market is not big. There are some other companies trying to solve this problem as well, but the market has not really been taken. So I think it's actually a very good point to enter. But in the future, we still need to target larger population as well. But I don't think we can start by targeting everybody. So we have to be very focused in our attempts at first. And in a way, I'm looking at it, okay, if I remove Japan and the bank account from what we are doing as Giga, then essentially we are creating trust across border, because it's not only in Japan. Like if you move to a different country and want to use financial services, very often you have to start proving who you are from the beginning. And eventually what we want is that people who travel between countries, they would be able to build up their credit score, build up the trust, and take it with them if they move to a new country or if they go back to their home country. So this is a long-term vision, what we have with.
You have been in Estonia and Japan, so you have the experience to compare two mindsets and cultures. What are the differences, especially in the founders' mindset in different countries?
I think Estonia and Japan are actually quite different, but complementary. Reason being that in Estonia, people are very much solving problems with software. And so if you have a problem, we maybe buy a couple of pieces from the shelf and create the software to make those things function smooth. In Japan, mindset is very different. People are very much into monotsukuri mindset. Monotsukuri means making things. So Japan, like craftsmanship, is very deeply rooted into Japanese psyche. And what it means is that it's actually hardware. And if you build something, if you make a thing, you can make it only once. So it usually takes lots of planning and you make it, and it's very difficult to change after that. But the software actually, I mean, it's soft. You can change as many times as you want. You can actually improve it after you actually already built it once. But the Japanese mindset, it has been difficult for Japanese companies to understand that. So even they apply this monotsukuri thinking also on software. And that's why I see that Estonian actually is quite strong in software, and that's why we could even maybe teach something to Japanese companies as well. And but of course, when it comes to kind of founder mindset, then another difference is that in Estonia we are small, 1.3 million people in a country. It's not the market. It's maybe at best it's a test market. Japan has 126 million people, so almost for one Estonians are 100 Japanese, and what it means is that you can actually grow quite big just in Japanese market. So while Estonians, we have to be kind of born global, international from day zero. Then in Japan, many companies, they grow relatively like good sized, but then they struggle to go to next countries because there will be also, okay, going abroad will be more risky, while the revenue is still coming from Japan. So say argument with, okay, we have to kind of protect our revenue coming in from Japan. So, so in this sense, one of the challenge Japan tries to solve right now is to have more globally minded startups. I think it will improve, but yeah, even so, like language issue, because in Japan people don't really speak that much English, and yeah. So, but of course, I've met many very driven and very internationally minded Japanese entrepreneurs also. So I know that yeah, Japan actually has quite bright future in that regard.
So is the startup ecosystem in Japan? We know Estonia has a leading country, especially creating lots of unicorns and successful startups and entrepreneurs for the last couple of decades. And how is the Japan doing?
Japan, it's getting better. When maybe 10, 15 years you had ago, you had startup events, people with suits and in a very strict kind of conference setting. Then now we have a quite vibrant startup movements in most large cities. I'm living in Tokyo, so Tokyo of course is large. Although maybe on per capita Estonia is far. There's still lots of stuff happening in Tokyo. So like every week, if you want, you can attend some startup events. You can participate in some programs. And my experience with Giga was that I was living in Japan when I created the company. But I created a Estonian company first, and technically we were actually a foreign company entering Japanese market. And what happened was that I found the Japanese startup ecosystem and all those programs available are actually very welcoming, because they do want to have more diversity. They do welcome non-Japanese startups to come to Japan and participate in accelerators, in pitch competition. But of course, it helps when you actually are committed and you are in the country. And it also helps immensely if you speak the language. Because, yes, there are some opportunities also when you just speak in English. But to actually get through to people and to create meaningful relationships, then speaking Japanese is actually kind of a secret weapon that if you can, you should use.
You are probably facing lots of difficulties as being a foreigner and starting a company outside of Estonia. How do you overcome them, and what kinds of difficulties did you face since that you have started your?
So it's I just said like language is one of the issues. What's actually interesting is that I do speak Japanese, but very often I don't understand the hidden meaning. So I've had the meetings with Japanese counterparts where I understand every word, and I reply them, and my colleague is like, "Hey, they didn't ask for that," and like she actually already told us. So like, okay, like you have to actually tell me for me to understand. But in Japan, very often they imply things, and I'm actually not very good at that. So it's always if you do business in Japan, it's actually you do need to have a Japanese person with you, or like as a co-founder, but also as a co-worker, because they understand the hidden meanings and something which might not be understandable for foreigners. And of course, one of the things, but in Japan, if you go to Japan as a foreign startup, there's a lot of large companies in Japan who want to collaborate with startups. So they talk about proof of concept project. But in my experience, not very often those projects have led anything substantial. So like large companies in Japan, they know that they have to improve, they have to become more innovative, and they know that they don't actually have in-house capabilities to do that. And it's very trendy nowadays that, okay, let's do projects together with startups. But my experience, actually not one, but with several different companies, has been that very often they actually don't understand startups. They don't know how to work with them. And very often, okay, you do a proof of concept, but it rarely leads to any other follow-on meaningful project. It's very often like basically large companies are very risk averse. And even if you introduce a technology or a solution that could create them meaningful revenue in the future, current revenue very often comes from some legacy solution that, but maybe it's lucrative. They know it doesn't have much future. But for example, for maintenance contracts from their clients, they actually still get money. And introducing a new thing might actually make this old revenue less stable. And of course, they want to protect rather than to, like a challenge.
What is the situation with the Giga right now, and how do you motivate your teammates, especially different cultures? And what kinds of metrics do you track? I know that you have early traction and customers, and what is your plans for the couple of years time?
So with Giga, yeah, basically we have launched our service. We were looking at the service model. We tried to learn from Europe and the US how neobanks in those countries have been organized. So, meaning it means that we were able to get a license in Japan, which allows us to connect with banks over APIs and get like account information, but also to push for transactions. And we were able to launch the service with a regional bank in Tokyo. But right now, basically, we are in a situation where we have done the pilot, so to say, but we still need to increase the number of banking partners. So we do have first experience with customers, but we haven't really launched the full service what we want to launch yet. We just had bank account, but we do need to have also payment cards and remittance, and then we would be able to add kind of full value for our customers. So right now, this year will be basically the year where we really need to reach product market fit. Then after this, we just need to take the foreigner market, expand to some other Asian countries who have a similar problem. But at the same time, also, what we really want to do, we want to start helping our customers to build up the trust and make it possible for them to access higher level of financial services. If they want to build up their lives in Japan, they would be able to get a housing loan. Like we would be underwriting their housing loan, and eventually also we would be helping them to take some trust back to their home country if they have to. So so next year, right now we are still very small. We have a tiny team, but plans are much.
Are there any competition or similar products in the market?
There are a couple of banks who have understood that foreigners actually are a good market opportunity. So they have been targeting foreigners. We see them actually not really as competitors, but also potential collaboration partners, because we are able to make this we're actually able to help those banks with their target. And we also see there are quite a few companies who are providing various life services to foreigners. They usually don't know much about fintech, but I know that some of them do have ambitions in fintech as well. And also, there is quite a big number of remittance companies who are because most of the foreigners in Japan, they come from Southeast Asia, and they send money back home to save, to help family, or to pay back loan. And the remittance business has been quite lucrative. And those companies today, they are usually just focused on remittance, but some of them also are thinking wider and starting to introduce collaboration with banks and so on. So right now we are actually at the start of a quite exciting moment in Japan, where things are starting to happen. And with Giga, we are positioned quite well to be part of those developments.
What are your learnings, especially raising funding and also talking with investors and VCs, different kinds of VCs? What are your learnings?
This is one interesting thing is that valuations in Japan in early stage tend to be very low compared to Europe. Maybe because in Japan, not many investors actually have entrepreneurial experience by themselves. So they have been maybe working for larger companies or doing a spin-off business, but actual entrepreneurs who are investing, this is not really common in Japan yet. But of course, as an entrepreneur, I'm learning quite a lot from other entrepreneurs. And if I have an investor who has also gone through similar experiences, that this always has been very helpful for me. But in Japan, it's a little bit more difficult to find than maybe in some other places. But in a way, their number of venture capital companies in Japan is quite large. There is a lot of corporate venture capital around, which is maybe also a little bit unusual. And this corporate venture capital, it usually, you could see that, okay, there's a large company and they invest into strategic partnership, but not always. It doesn't really always have to be a partnership. The CVCs, they can also invest quite independent. But yeah, so I think Japan is, in terms of ecosystem, it's still developing, but it's a large place and moving to the right direction.
How do you maintain your work-life balance as a founder, and also what time management tactics do you use?
So I think the word, if you say work-life balance, it means that very often, okay, you don't really like to work, so you have to balance it with some other things. But in my case, yeah. So I believe that maybe I like working, but it's very difficult for me to find the word balance. So at the moment, I've actually organized my life in a way that I can really focus on making the company a success. My family, actually, I moved my family from Japan to Estonia. So right now I'm actually mostly in Japan focusing on work. But when I'm coming to Estonia, I will be able to take a little bit of time off and maybe clear my head and gain a fresh perspective also on the challenges I have in Japan, because I will be able to be a little bit detached and spend more time with my family. So I've actually, I'm trying to balance it, not date kind of patching my time in different locations. But yeah, so other than that, I've learned that it's quite important to kind of to work with your mindset on a daily basis to basically to be able to focus on main tasks that delivers what you need to do in a day, but also also overall. So also more long term, you have to be very grateful for the opportunities that you have gotten, and approach things from the position of abundance. And when you have, of course, as an entrepreneur, you never have enough resource So if you're able to have a correct mindset, you're able to be more resourceful. So you just need to be more creative and come up with solutions.
In the first day of your Japanese experience, what surprised you most
Mm.
in daily life?
At first, actually, like there are so many people in Tokyo. I'm coming from a very small town in Estonia, so we have like 2,500 people in my hometown. So going to the Tokyo, it felt like a large Asian metropolis, like with neon lights, lots of people around, loud. And interestingly enough, I've actually gotten used to that now. So when somebody new is visiting Japan, to whom it's the first time, I really enjoy seeing Japan through their eyes. Because for me, I've been in Tokyo total almost 15 years. And in a way, that's my home. At first it used to be that I had my life in Japan and I had my life in Estonia, and they were relatively separate. Now it's completely blended for me. So, like for me, being in Estonia, being in Japan, both feels very normal. And I believe that in the beginning, when my first year in Japan, when I was an exchange student, I had to pinch myself daily to remind myself that, okay, you are in Japan. You have to enjoy the experience, be aware, and take those experiences in. But now it's just my life.
Did you have time to travel inside of Japan, and do you have a route for the first time comers?
Interestingly enough, it's relatively expensive to travel in Japan, or it used to be. Nowadays, with weekend, it's actually Japan is becoming increasingly affordable. So I do encourage everybody to visit Japan because it's a great time to visit, and the yen is cheap and the food is great. But of course, in Japan, I've been mostly in Tokyo. But if you want to experience a real Japanese history, then you have to go to Kyoto and Nara in Kansai area. So this is a very like really great area. And if you want to experience nice, like beautiful beaches, you can find that in Okinawa. And at the same time, if you want to experience downhill skiing, it's the best snow you ever seen, then you just have to go to Hokkaido. So Japan is, it has tropics, it has proper winter, and it has lots of culture, and of course, yeah, many mountains. In Japan, the highest mountain is Mount Fuji, and there's a saying that if you live in Japan and you never climb Mount Fuji, you're a fool. But if you climb it twice, you're twice as much fool. I climbed it.
What is your superpower?
Uh, I think I think I'm lucky because I've been able to, like very often when I'm in a difficult situation, I'm able to meet somebody who is actually able to help or like who trains my team. And so exactly, it's the right timing. So it has happened not once, but actually many times. And in a way, also what I believe is that like yeah, like for, at first difficulty, I mean, you shouldn't really give up because as an entrepreneur, it's the road is bumpy, and this is my choice to choose this road. So we have to be ready to actually outlast difficult times and to be ready for the good times.
If you have the ability to go back in time and when you graduate from the school, what advice, three advice should you give yourself, younger yourself, today?
Mm. In a way, it's actually quite interesting one. What I've thought and what I actually experienced repeatedly, it's true, is that whether you do small things or you do big things, they both are hard. But actually, doing big things might be easier at the end because there is less competition. Because most people don't really have enough courage to set high goals. So they will. So there's actually more competition on mediocre goals. So actually, setting high goals from the beginning, that would be like maybe I should have done it already faster and earlier. But yeah, basically, what I feel is that even if you don't reach those like high goals, like you will still be far ahead of anybody else. So in this sense, that I think that's a very useful strategy, and especially nowadays because I believe that it doesn't matter where you live nowadays that much anymore, and you can choose who you are. You can be anybody, but you cannot be everybody at once. So you have to choose.
That's a great advice. And do you read entrepreneurship books, or what kinds of blog posts or movies recently you have watched?
I do read entrepreneurship books, and there are some of the books that I keep going back. So, like one of the books is from like The Truth About Hard Things. I've read that book like a few times, and every time I go back, maybe my own experience has also evolved, and like I see different different angles of the content, and it is helpful. I try to also one of the things what I try to build better habits, but I'm still work in progress in many cases. But yeah, this is one thing what I try to do as well. And yeah, so I do listen quite a lot of podcasts. Like, recently I've been listening quite a lot of Tire as the CEO, like Steve Bartlett. That actually quite many good discussions there with entrepreneurs. And, it's really a good opportunity to actually be part of those conversations. Otherwise, would be like even like yeah, not long ago would be maybe like not accessible. But now you can actually, even if you don't know the person, you are able to listen to the conversation and distill learnings for yourself. So I really do enjoy that. But yeah, so like before that, I would learn. I read many Tim Ferriss books. Listened to like his podcast, and yeah, so on and so on.
Raul, thank you very much. It was truly insightful about also your experience in a foreign country. I want to thank you again for being on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Burak.
Thank you.